Anyone using new media to connect more?
Well, I think that question is directly relevant to the point, Paula, that you raised about the cooperation between human rights and humanitarian organizations. The International Rescue Committee has a long pattern of quietly sharing information with Human Rights Watch and other advocacy organizations, and they have understood that precisely, Paula, what you described, that we cannot endanger our staff on the ground by ourselves making statements, whereas an advocacy organization that doesn't have staff on the ground can make points that need to be registered in the larger world. But that becomes very much more complicated in an era when not only is there instant communication, but our communications are monitored. The clearest case was Darfur, Sudan as a whole, in which there's no question that internal email traffic and email traffic between the field and headquarters was monitored by the Sudanese government, with the result, as I discovered on each of my visits to Khartoum, that there was a very large dossier that the Humanitarian Affairs Council had about any and all complaints they might have of us based on data that they had accumulated. And so it means that the kind of information sharing that was much more feasible in a pre-electronic, or not pre-electronic, but pre-new media age has to be done very much more carefully. We're one of the agencies that was expelled from northern Sudan. We're still in southern Sudan. But it's very clear that was based in significant part because of our activities in areas like women's-based programming, advocacy against gender-based violence, all of which was duly recorded and stored up as a bill of attainder against us when we were given the reasons for our expulsion. So I think that the new media provides huge opportunities for telling our stories in the wider world, but also is a cautionary tale precisely on the question of security, not only in terms of relations between human rights organizations and humanitarian organizations, but also for humanitarian organizations on the basis of what we do in one country and how it can very quickly circulate to governments in other countries.
Renate Blum from Civicus, and I just wanted to know, Civicus has a civil society watch program, and we have watched in the last years increasing legislation which are restricting civil society all over the world, and particularly advocacy civil society. And my question is, do you see that delivery organizations, humanitarian organizations, could even help and say, I mean, this is absolutely unacceptable in the way civil societies muesli, what do you say, are really taking now their advocacy away. And in so many countries that they cannot even assemble, or they cannot even speak, and they can, so, and even to the way that they have been imprisoned in quite a few countries, and I don't want to name them here. But the thing is, in which way? It goes always that, oh, the NGOs are good as long as they deliver. But as soon as they do advocacy, and this is, of course, sometimes very uncomfortable for governments, so we face this very, very strongly. And my question is, how do you think civil society as a whole can really move and make its voice much more heard in this?
Yeah, I think it's important to accept complementarity here, and that's the way in which we operate. Now, Amnesty International, as a human rights organization, we do a lot of research, documentation in those very conflict areas that you've mentioned, and we go in without any protection. We don't even have the resources to create the kind of operational security that some of the humanitarian organizations do, because our operations on the ground are very small. But we do a lot of data collection. We expose our own staff to risk, but we also expose those who come to speak to us at risk. And because of that, we rely very heavily on complementarity. We don't expect, and we don't reveal our sources. We've been thrown out of countries. We've faced a lot of pressure to reveal our sources, and we have refused. So I think complementarity is important here, and recognizing that each one of us has a certain mandate and a mission, and we should respect each other's mission, but then cooperate within that. You're right in terms of the pressure that is being brought to bear, the security legislation that has been introduced in many countries, and that has made it harder. I mean, many of my fellow panelists here know that their own organizations have been accused from time to time of all types of crimes, national security crimes or whatever, because even for simple reasons, I mean, maybe it's data on rape survivors, and that is suddenly becomes very sensitive for the government, and they don't want that revealed. So in those types of situations, my approach would be complementarity. My approach would also be, I think, it's the way in which we operate in terms of confidentiality. And in the longer term, I think the important thing is that we should all have the goal of creating more stable, secure, open, free societies. So in the longer term, we all need to work on the same strategy, but we will have to use different methodologies to get there.
Not to repeat, I think complementarity is very important because we do have different missions and we don't use the opportunity enough to do that. But I would also, I think advocacy, even for organizations that are known to only deliver today, will be much more a component for the future, because we don't want to deliver for ages. We just have to think about what society are we actually trying to create through our delivery work. We're not there to stay. So we have a lot of advocacy work to do in the context where we work. Advocacy towards the mission that we are there to do, to improve the rights of children. And that is not necessarily the whole civil society's rights, but it is in that context, and we need, again, a balancing act to be able to stay with the children. But if we were better on complementarity, we could really work on the whole context together. We need to do that better. I mean, I would say that so far we have succeeded in balancing that, and it's also, again, a little bit back to Save the Children Alliance using its differences, meaning, for instance, in Darfur we could stay because we have Save the Children Sweden in Darfur. In the Middle East we have some ways of working in the alliance where we can be a little bit tactical, and I also think that having a rights agenda for children, yes, sometimes we will be not maybe impartial because we are with the children. But we have to kind of see what's in the best interest of children, and we don't want to be thrown out. So this is really a lively debate internally, and being more and more complex. But I guess we are a little bit on the same line, how to work better together. Can I just say shortly that new media, it puts a pressure on staff, because journalists are being pressured. I mean, the best story, the quickest, and we want to get out there, we need funds, we need people to support us, so let's have the best one-liner with Twitter and whatever. So new media creates a pace of working that creates opportunities, but also something, it creates a way of working that we are not accustomed to, and there are popping up risks because we have individuals who really want to make a difference in our organizations, and they may use blogs and Twitters a little bit too quick, and we have to be reactive to that. I just think it's something we need to know a little bit how to handle, but it's what we see now.